This is Michael Lukes, Programs Manager for Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, and today I'm joined by Elizabeth Presson, Founder and Chief Strategist at Working Remotely. Liz, thanks a lot for joining me and for agreeing to speak at the upcoming 2014 CEO National Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about Working Remotely.
Sure. So Working Remotely is a media site that is targeted towards business leaders who are running distributed companies and the employees who work for those distributed companies. So more and more there are companies around the world that either have tons of offices that are scattered or they have no office at all, which is becoming more popular than probably anyone ever thought. And so there's a wealth of content that can be created around the methods of working remotely and the places that you can work remotely in, big cities around the world. And there's also some people who do it really, really well. So Working Remotely creates and curates all of that kind of information and then puts it out into the world so people can learn how to be their most productive selves when they're not sitting in a traditional office.
So what was it that led to the creation of Working Remotely?
Well, first I should say that Working Remotely started as just kind of this general idea. I was living and working in New York City, and I started working for a company that was based in Minneapolis. And because I didn't want to move to Minneapolis and I wanted to stay in New York City, they allowed me to work remotely. And so I began going to different co-working spaces and coffee shops and meeting people who are really great at working remotely. And then I started developing my own methods and really trying to figure out what worked best and how to kind of stay on task when you're really in charge of your own time and your own day. And so I just started writing about that. I just started digging in and sharing that kind of information. So people started getting excited about it, so I decided to start a blog. And then once I actually ended up moving to Minneapolis for a promotion with the company, and when I did that, I realized that it was actually the lifestyle and the autonomy and the power of living my life the way I wanted to that was making me so inspired about my work, and it was actually a key driver of great work. So now, about 2 years later, Working Remotely has turned into not only a media site, but I've been able to spin off a consultancy called Presson that actually helps organizations learn how to inspire and engage a new era of employees and customers, the kinds of people who embrace a virtual life. So it could be working remotely, and it could be learning about companies online, but it's really embracing this whole new digital environment that we all live and breathe in.
So do you feel that your entrepreneurial passion was always within you from an early age, or did the experience you shared with us kind of push that to the forefront?
So this was funny. I was just with my mom the other day, and she opened her wallet and actually was like, "Here, you need to see this." And she showed me a business card that I had created when, I was maybe 8 or maybe 12. But it had me thinking about this question. And, I guess I've always been starting businesses. I remember always trying to sell things to my friends and my family members when I was really little. And then when I went to college, I've always been a good student, but there was something that was so much more appealing to me about working than there was about going to class, because I wanted to get that kind of hands-on experience. So I spent most of my time working in a newspaper, and I eventually became the advertising manager, where I got to figure out how we were going to sell ads to the local businesses and how we were going to pitch them. And then I also got to manage a pretty large team of student account executives. And so, yeah, I guess I have always been an entrepreneur, but more than anything, I've just aspired to be a leader. And that's what really lights me up is leading people and seeing them enjoy their work.
On behalf of the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to speak at the upcoming 2014 CEO National Conference. What do you plan on sharing with the students and young entrepreneurs in attendance?
Well, I've taken a really unique approach to entrepreneurship, and it's not typically the path that you hear about. It's not the story of I had an idea, quit my job and got investment, or I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a fancy story, or it's not anything that sounds glamorous. And what I'm going to talk about is that in this new era of work, people have these different options that they've never had before. And there are tons of different paths to entrepreneurship, stuff that's never existed in the past. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about. I'll be talking about my own experience, which is, I went in, I was working remotely, I moved for the promotion like I mentioned, and not too much longer later, it was less than a year, I quit. And I walked into my boss's office and I said, I quit, and I was the marketing director, and so it was definitely going to have an impact on the organization. But in the next breath, I literally pitched my boss on becoming one of the first clients of the consultancy. So is it still risky? Totally, of course. But I had this long kind of drawn-out plan, and I still do. And, other entrepreneurs in this era don't have to be a business owner to be free. That's kind of the other thing I'm going to talk about. It's not only different paths to becoming a business owner, but it's being the CEO of your own life in a little bit of a different way. For example, I run a fully distributed company, so everyone who works for me, they can work and live wherever they want. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And there are a lot of companies out there who do the same thing. So you might not own a business, but you can definitely work where you want, when you want. And there are just a lot more options. Companies are more open to hiring entrepreneurs than ever. They know that we're sharp people who can really move the needle. So they're willing to hire freelancers. They're willing to bring in consultants and small agencies like Presson. And they're also willing to let people work from anywhere they want. So they're willing to have distributed workers. And I think that all those options should be considered when you're trying to figure out, what you want to do with your life. So that's what I'll be talking about at the conference.
And how has this new era of work evolved? Is it largely technology-driven, or are there other factors as well that has pushed us in this direction?
Yeah, so I think technology is a big part of it. I mean, it would be impossible to do distributed work or remote work, whatever you want to call it, without, almost a pervasive internet connection all the time, without being able to pick up our laptops and go wherever we need to. So, of course, technology plays a huge role. But I think more than that, it is just a different generation of people with different aspirations. In one word, I would say it's freedom. We care a lot about our freedom as, I won't say just the millennial generation, but, the last few generations, and I think we can kind of see it trickle down, that we just care a lot about our freedom, and we really want to make a huge impact on the world. And so I think that companies are realizing that if they want A players and they want people who care about their work so much, they're going to have to make changes to fit within the freedom of the people who work for them. So I actually see that as more of the reason this is becoming such a commonplace thing now. Of course, the technology helps facilitate it, but definitely other reasons for it too.
So what challenges does this new era pose for millennials?
Oh, man, there are a lot of challenges. I think the biggest challenge is figuring out what you want to do with your work, and if you actually want to be an entrepreneur or if you want to do something different. A lot of tech and startups and entrepreneurialism, it's all very sexy and it's all very glamorous looking. And I think sometimes that can attract people that might not actually want to play in the space. And so I would say that the challenge is to find a balance between something that you think is really cool and inspiring and something that actually fits with your personality and the way that you work. Also just kind of diving into who you are and what you actually want and not getting caught up in the hoopla of things. And also there's a lot of talk about passion. You have to find a good intersection between what you're really great at and your passion. And I think that that's something that, there's a lot of fluff about passion and work and passion, but then there's also a lot of truth in it because like I said, we're very connected to our work as a generation, and so you have to find something you can connect to emotionally. And if you're not emotionally connected to your work, you're less likely to do great work. So I would say that those challenges are just more apparent than ever, kind of in this new era.
What's the biggest mistake you see millennials making in regards to work?
That's a good question. I would say that it's getting caught up in the idea that you have to approach starting a business with a ton of capital or a ton of time. I get a lot of people who come to me and ask me, like, what should my pitch deck look like for my investor presentation and things like that. And while that's a perfect way to approach it for some companies, it shouldn't just be the de facto standard that people go to, that they immediately think that they need to raise investment capital. So I would say that that's definitely one thing. And the other thing is writing off corporate jobs right away. And I know that sounds very counterintuitive to what I do, but I am such a believer that corporate jobs are CEO boot camp. Absolutely. I know it was for me. And also, learning how to get what you want in a corporation is one of the best ways to find your voice. And so that's the biggest mistake I see millennials make, is that they just write off corporations. Rightfully so. I mean, some corporations have not always treated employees well, but it's definitely an experience that I think is worth having.
So what are some of the primary benefits of the new era of work for young employees?
I think it's a lot easier to get what you want out of a job. It's a lot easier to ask for what you want from your boss. And more than anything, you can connect with anyone in the world because of digital technologies. So if I want to work remotely, I can type work remotely in my browser, find workingremote.ly, go to it, and find hundreds of other people who have, made the ask from their boss to work remotely and have kind of won the battle. And that goes for anything that you could want: starting a business, working remotely, getting a promotion, and I think that that's a pretty beautiful thing.
I should have submitted my story because I was actually asked to work in an office in Chicago, and that's when I brought up the idea of working remotely instead, and thankfully I was able to work remotely.
Yeah, and most people don't realize that if you just ask, it's usually an option. So I always think that that's interesting, because when people come to me and ask the question, I always say, have you asked them if you can work remotely or if you can do a trial for a few weeks? And a lot of people have just, won it over that way, which I'm sure that's what you did. You just asked, and it was okay.
Yeah, there's a quote from Kara from Reblog that I absolutely love, where she talks about ordering what's on the menu just because that's all you think is available versus asking for what you actually want. If you want scallops and it's not on the menu, still ask for scallops.
Oh, I love that. Exactly. Yes. That's amazing.
So a question for our entrepreneurial students who are listening: how can startup founders, so that when they're starting their business, when they're forming everything, how can they take advantage of the new era of work when they start to hire on employees?
Oh, so, this is really big, because when they start to hire employees, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about as I'm starting to do it, and a lot of the clients of Pursuit are fully distributed companies. Something to think about is what kind of talent that you want to have. And if you want to hire people who are only in your area, so you're limiting your talent pool if you're only hiring people in your area. So that's kind of an obvious thing to think about. And so I would say, if you're looking for the right person, if you're looking for the right people to join your team and the people who are going to help move the needle, is there a reason to bucket that search into your immediate location? So that would be the first thing. And the second thing is, open Google and type in employee and engagement. And you're going to see that U.S. businesses are losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year because employees are unengaged. And one of the things that you can do to get employees invested in their work is to have them live a life that they love. And most people don't want to be told where to be at a certain time. They don't want to feel like they have to raise their hand when they need to go to the bathroom or they need a break or they need to have lunch. And most people want the autonomy to sign out of their email for a few hours during the day, go to a whiteboard or go to a coffee shop or whatever they need to get out of kind of the boxes that we've put ourselves into when it comes to work. So that's what I would say is really important for new founders to think about when it comes to employees. People who are able to work and live their lives simultaneously are absolutely retained at a way higher rate. There are companies like Upworthy and GitHub and Lullabot and Automatic, which of course is the one everyone knows of. I mean, the list goes on and on. These companies get people to work on their teams, and then they don't have to worry about how fast people are going to kind of churn and burn because people are happy and they're doing amazing work. I mean, all of those companies produce incredible things.
What's your best overall piece of advice for millennials?
Best piece of advice. I'm going to relate this to the talk that I'm giving. It's to find a path that works for you. I had a business before I started working remotely and Pursuit, and even though we were experiencing a really great level of success, and it was kind of the benchmark that I had set of when we reached that success that I would quit my job, I wasn't ready. And the people who knew the business that we had started were like kind of confused by that, and they were kind of, like, why aren't you doing it? You said you were going to do it, but I just wasn't mentally ready. And then when I went to go quit my corporate job a couple of years later, and I was mentally ready, I was definitely scrutinized for making a risky choice of leaving a really great job. And so, my biggest piece of advice is that you're never going to make people happy. And really, you shouldn't. You shouldn't care about making people happy. You should only do what's best for you. And there are an infinite number of possibilities in doing what works best for you. And nobody can tell you, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about different options and different possibilities, but you're going to think of things that I didn't. And you're going to create your own path. And that's a really important thing to always keep in the back of your head. Nobody should be able to dictate that path for you.
Great. And how can people find out more about working remotely and Pursuit?
Sure. So you can go to workingremote.ly. That's where you'll find Working Remotely. And you can soon go to pursuitof.com.
Great. Well, once again, this is Michael Lukes with Elizabeth Presson. Liz, thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the 2014 CEO National Conference.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I can't wait.